morning, Prof. Happy Sunday.
Are we back to this, baby? Goodness me. Good morning. I thought you were going to say Happy New Year. I was going to say that was last week, but
no, is that because I know you're not really into all this Happy Sunday, Happy New Week, Happy Monday.
You can just say happy. That's great. We can be happy regardless.
Well,
whether
it's
Monday,
Sunday.
Tuesday,
it is Sunday. Well, yeah, the weather isn't that great as such, but we're not complaining. We're still very grateful to God. How are you doing?
Good. Doing good.
Yeah?
Doing great. Thank you. This is we're going into, depending on how you look at it, we're going to the third week
of January.
Yeah. For most people, it will be the second week of working, but third week of January. Yeah. I mean, today's the 15th, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
16th, rather.
Not 15th.
Today's the 16th. Yeah. So we're going to third week of January. Wonderful year. We're already advancing on all fronts. What's not to like?
We are indeed. Yes, we are. Well, I have to say, coming out of isolation, definitely, I feel like, yes, I am advancing. Everything is just advancement around me. It's like I'm seeing advancement everywhere I go. So yes, really.
Yeah, and one more thing. We started this last week. Our prayer meetings are back. Live classes back.
Yes.
So, most of the church activities are back.
It's back. Yes. And viewers, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is great to have you on the show. This is your favorite Sunday morning show, SonRise. Please do let your friends and family know we're live, so it's only going to be about 25 minutes max and we'll be done. You don't want to miss everything we have in store for you today. So yes, thank you for joining us. Prof, you see, for this morning, I have a very interesting question for you, and I know you're going to love this because I know you're a man of, you're a leader, you're a man of integrity. You know some of these things, because the things you say sometimes I go back and I check, wow, this Prof. That's why I call you Prof, right? But you see, the question for you this morning, it's around leadership, and the sort of standards that they're being held accountable. When we think of as a leader, should they really be held to a different standard to what other people are held to? I'll tell you why I asked that question. I'm sure you've seen this. It's been going on for a few weeks now, about the party that happened in, I'm not sure if it was number 10 it happened in, or anyway,
bring your own booze. Yeah.
wherever it happened. So that party happened, and also the Djokovic's case. The fact that he got his visa cancelled. There's just so many different things, and I'm sure you're probably still going to take it to something else eventually. But my question is that should leaders actually be held to a different standard to other people, or you're a leader? I'm not a leader, I'm a follower. They're all held to the same standards. Doesn't really make any difference. What are your views on this?
When you started, it reminded me of that one of those times when the people that were questioning Jesus came and said, teacher, we know that you don't care about any man. He said, you guys are
well, it's not like that.
Set me up. But no, thank you. Obviously, I appreciate the appreciation is mutual, Bibby. So thank you. So I think the short answer to your question is yes and no, right? And I think that somebody will say that's no answer. What do you mean yes and no? So as always, because we've got two segments to this, right? One before the break, one after the break. I will try to kind of set some sort of foundation before we go across to the break. And so when I say yes and no, I mean that on the one hand, you would argue that leaders should be held to a higher standard, right? Because they are in a position of visibility, they're in a position that can drive the direction of an organization, of a family, and so forth. So there are things that others may have the flexibility to do, and a leader will say, because I'm a leader, because I'm a role model, I'm not going to allow myself to do this. A bit like Paul's sentiment where he says all things are permissible, but that doesn't mean we do all things, right? So that's one. But on the other hand, you say yes, right? Yes being that there is a fundamental basis, fundamental, if you like, standard against which those standards are aligned.
Yeah.
And you don't want a situation where you have one set of rules for them and one set of rules for others, whichever way, right? So you should not be seen to be unfair in your execution of the rules just because you're dealing with something that is visible. And unfairness can actually be two ways. Lack of fairness can be seen to be showing favoritism, and lack of fairness can also be shown in being seen to use somebody as a scapegoat, just to set an example. Either way, that's unfair, right? So that's what I mean. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that a leader often is held to a higher standard, a role model, just because the consequences of their actions are much more severe and much more widespread. And no, because even whatever that standard is, the standard of fairness should never be in question. And so to kind of relate this, also in the name of setting the standard, setting the foundation rather, to relate this to two examples you gave. One example is that of our Prime Minister, right? Some people would say beloved Prime Minister, and some people would say not so beloved. Whatever side of the political spectrum you sit on, there has been some controversy, okay, around the application of standards, where what seems to be a case of do as I say, but not as I do, has been making the rounds, and this is just not gone away, right? And you have people asking the question, really? So all these rules that are being set and being, put into law, that means that you see yourself, and people, you see yourselves as being above the law. That's not a good look, right? Regardless of what the, kind of the fine print ends up being, the investigations or the inquests, whatever they call them, ends up turning up. The fact that there is even that thought in people's hearts that, hang on, you're not holding yourself to the same standard as you're holding us, that's already a cause for concern, right? And so that's the context to that. The question should be, if a law is being passed and people are being asked, do not socialize, do not have parties, do not do this, do not do the other. To the question you were asking, the expectation, even if it's not stated, is that a leader, at the very least, is subject to those same laws, and even sometimes goes a step above, just so there's no appearance of impropriety of any sort. So I think that's where that is coming from. And then the second element around the Djokovic question you're asking is that you would say that Djokovic says, look, regardless of what you think about my stance, or what may be seen as my anti-vaccination stance, or even my anti-establishment stance, the fact is that a procedure was set in place by the officials, right, by Tennis Australia, by the system. I passed through that procedure and I checked every box, right? And now it's almost like you're trying to shift the goalpost simply because you don't like what the result ended up giving you. If you have a problem, right, the fair application of the rules should say you have met the requirements of the rules as we set them, and we're not going to seek to change these rules just because they favor you and we don't like that. The issue we have is that we may need to change those rules, but not try to penalize you because the rules worked maybe in a different way as to what we anticipated. I know we need to go on a break now, but when we do come back, I want to look at how this really applies in many other different ways. But Bibby.
And yes, that thank you very much. I think you've kind of laid the foundation very well. I hope all of our viewers, you're not going to miss the next segment of the show. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly.
See you.
The Egyptians relentless on our trail. The Red Sea impassable in our fall. Between a rock and a hard place. Insurmountable, unnavigable, untraversable the terrain might be. Yet, the voice of He who set the world in motion I hear. In the midst of darkness He speaks light. Trapped in a repetitive cycle the days have seemed. But now I hear Him say, turn you northwards. I hear Him say, go forward, for I will make a way where there seems to be no way. Against all odds, 2022 is our year to advance. The prophetic word from heaven over our lives in this new year is advance. The Red Sea will part, the Jordan will back up, the rocks, the mountains will give way. All He requires of you is to advance in faith. In the face of daunting odds, advance. It is your time to advance. Go forward.
Good morning, MOG.
Good
so
morning,
good to see you,
morning.
sir.
Yes, this is Pastor Yemi Adenuga. I know that the last time you were you
have to be so formal. I've just said MOG.
Well, that is his title, right? Everybody that sees him knows. You say MOG. For the uninitiated, they might say, "What is MOG? A mug? Does he like cats? Muggy?" It's a man of God.
It is man of God, yes. So, well, I mean, yes. Please go on with your formal introduction of man of God. Well, I was going to say of MOG.
No. I was just going to say that, for people who, I'm sure that a lot of you who are watching, you'd have seen him, right? In the last few weeks, he's one of the pastoral team, of course. You'd have seen him during the church services, doing his powerful transitions and prayers and so forth. Yeah, that's the man that you've seen. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, MOG.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you, sir, for joining us. So great to have you back on the show. This morning, you have joined us for our Spotlight Minutes. As we've said, you're not a stranger. You've become part of the house now. So after some time, we'll start giving some badges to some people, like they keep coming. You start collecting those badges. But anyway, for this morning, just as we launched last year, towards the end of last year, I believe it was, another very exciting game on the show. And in fact, I like to call it game because I still want it to be very light. It's still very light. It's still very, very fun for a Sunday morning. And for this morning, this game, this one is called Tell Us About It. And what are you telling us about? You would ask me. Okay, it is basically for you to tell us about an experience you've had. I mean, just look back into your life. What is it that you think has really stayed with you that you want to tell us about? So can you think of something very quickly that you would like to tell us about this morning?
I think an experience that came to light would be my recent managed quarantine experience.
Oh, wow.
Now, to talk about.
I love that. I think I'm really getting excited. Prof, I don't know if you are about this. I am getting excited about this.
What was that, COVID or something else?
Yeah, it was
quarantine.
One of those COVID isolation thing. I will return from a red list country, Nigeria, and then that was just when they classified Nigeria as a red list country, and then you had to get into a managed quarantine for 10 days.
Wow.
So it was set up. What did you say?
So yeah, just tell us, how was that? Were you there for the whole of the 10 days? Because I remember there was a time that was kind of cut off or something.
Now, that's then the miracle, because 3 or 4 days into it, in fact, by the third day, there was something in the air about some change in the government.
Oh, wow.
And we all glued to the TV in my hotel. Thankfully for me, I was in a decent hotel, so my experience wasn't too bad, but I had a different kind of experience. And there was the announcement by the minister, that they were turning back on the thing. And by 4 p.m. of the fourth day, we were all jubilant, rushing to get out of the hotel.
Oh wow!
Sorry, if I may chip in, how did it work when you got to the airport? Was it that you were kind of marched from the plane into the hotel? How did that work?
Interesting. Now, I got wind of the fact that it will play out that way. So when somebody said you'll be escorted from the port of entry, I didn't quite get it. So as soon as I got my passport stamped and I was told, wait a minute, and somebody from G4S approached me and said, can you please come with me? So I was like, okay, what's going on here? And that was the beginning of a restricted life. I was already in the UK, but restricted. So yeah, you're right. So I was marched off from port of entry, and I waited for a few other guys, and they were straight in the coach to the hotel.
Oh, so what would you say then impacted you most from this experience?
I think what impacted me was the restriction. The restriction started from, ordinarily coming into the country, you get your passport stamp, you want to go and pick your baggage and get off, whichever way. But on this occasion, I couldn't even get my luggage. So it was straight being marched up to a small corner. Where are you booked in? And then to a coach, and from the coach straight to the hotel, and you're riding the coach. A few people got to the hotel that they were booked in, and they were told there was no availability for them. So I was Thankfully, not one of those. So already having thoughts in my mind, hey, what's going on here? But finally, I got into the hotel that I was going to be lodged in. So what stood in for me was the fact that, so not only did I got matched in through the process into the hotel, I could not freely go to the restaurant. I could not freely go and have a workout. I have to call to say, okay, yes, I want to have fresh air. I want to take exercise.
Wow.
I get escorted from my room downstairs to the major car park, do my running.
My goodness.
And they're watching me. I'm wondering what's going on here. They're timing me. You don't have more than, and then you're
house arrest. You're under house arrest.
Do you understand?
That was it. That was the restriction.
Wow.
And then your meals get served at a particular time.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Do you know, it's like, thank you so much, Emoji, for sharing that, because that's just giving us insight into what life would have really looked like in that environment, because we all learned about the fact that yes, hotel quarantine, you stay there and all of that stuff, but you know, that's some pretty serious experience there. But anyways, thank you so much for sharing. But do you know what, very last thing is, I know our time is running very fast, for our viewers this morning, what would you be, I mean, for you, from what you've explained so far, what would you want anyone who's watching this morning to take away from your experience?
I think it's important to cherish the moment of liberty that you have. What you think is liberty and freedom to do whatever you have to do, whenever you want to do it. I think it's not something you should take for granted. The fact that you are not under anybody's restriction, under any governance, even that you are fit to move about. So that's one thing. But that you have the liberty, the choice, and the freedom to do what you want. Something to take really very precious, because it could take it from you and you just can't do anything.
Do you know, I think we can go home now. In fact, maybe this is church right now. You know,
that's profound.
Thank you so much, Emoji. Thank you, really profound. Viewers, please help us love an emoji. Thank you so much for joining us again. We look forward to having you again. Hopefully, you wouldn't have to quarantine anyway. You're just coming straight. Yes, it will be good. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
In service.
God bless
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
The prophetic word from heaven over our lives in this new year is advance. It is your time to advance. Go forward.
Welcome back, Prof. Welcome back, viewers. So, Prof, I'm not going to take too much of our time. Please just take it from where we stopped. You had just explained the Djokovic case. I don't think you finished it before we went on break, but please take it off from there, please.
Oh, thank you, Bibby. I was just saying that there are two aspects to it. First of all, the standards. Sometimes we want to actually hold our leaders and our role models to what may be seen as a higher standard, just so there's no appearance of propriety. But we must also apply the standards the same way, fairly so, right? And I gave the example of in Djokovic's case, regardless of what you think about his views regarding the state and regarding vaccination and so forth, the fact of the matter, and the courts seem to agree, the fact of the matter are that there was a procedure that was set in place and he followed that procedure. And my understanding is that the application for exemption was done in a blinded way, so you couldn't tell who it was. And then, you know, the adjudicators, the independent panels, made their decision independently, two of them, and they came to the same conclusion. So it then seems to be unfair, the shifting of the goalposts or switching horses midstream. When the outcome is not quite what you want, but instead of now blaming the rules, you're trying to blame the person who followed the process, right? Yeah. And so, and I think that's it's not a conundrum, but it's a full picture that we have to bear in mind, because the question of standards in leadership, this is something that applies to every part of our lives, right? Right now, we're talking of Boris Johnson, we're talking of Novak Djokovic. But how many times have you heard your children say, "Mommy, that's not fair," right? You've seen yourself say, "Yeah, the children can do this, but I'm not going to do it because they are looking up." So I think within every culture where there is, every culture has a sense of, standards and shared values and systems. There's always this concept of leadership and the concept of being a role model that exists, right? Yeah. It's not a new thing, yeah? And also you would see that element of leadership being held to a higher standard. We see that in our faith, right? Where Jesus talked about saying the servant, the worker who knew what to do and went and still did something wrong will be lashed with many strokes, and the one who did not know and did something wrong will be lashed with fewer strokes. There will be repercussions either way. But to this scripture that many people try to quote but somehow don't quite get it right, he said, to whom much is given, of him much is expected. I believe that's the grammatically correct way of saying it. But but that's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
When there is a giving of leadership, when there is a giving of being a role model of that person, there is much being expected, right? And so I think that the question that this brings to mind, I think anybody that's listening already starts to think, yes, what of church? Right? What of church? Because I think the same questions apply. I will not go into any sort of detail because I don't need to, but I'm sure that everybody that is listening would have heard in times past about questions about the moral standards, right? And even ethical standards of some people who are in leadership within or around church.
Yeah.
And I think that as everybody in church, whoever has paid attention to this and sees themselves as part of the body of Christ, sometimes you may have found yourself in a situation, by choice or not, of having to almost defend the behavior of somebody else who identifies with the body, one way or another, right? Yeah. Even if you're not interested, somebody says, oh, look, you're a Christian. Tell me, why this, blah, blah, blah.
That's how a Christian behaves,
Exactly. Oh, this person did that. And you either find yourself trying to distance yourself from what the person has done, or trying to throw context or, provide context, or trying to defend it, right? Either way, I mean, whatever you do is your choice. But the point I'm trying to make here is that those questions arise. And I think the answer is the same. I don't think that it's different. This principle that God has set in place differs whether you're talking of a church setting or not. I think that if we find ourselves as people that subscribe to a particular way of thinking, a group of people, a church, family, a community, and we find ourselves finding ways to defend the indefensible simply because it's somebody with whom we identify, I think that really asks a big question, not about their morality, but about our own morality, our own compass, and our ethical standards. Because if I told you, and this is the unfairness I was saying about fairness and unfairness of it, if I told you a story and I say, like the prophet Nathan did to David, I'm not going to tell you the name of the person. I'll say this hypothetical rich man, and the king is very quick to say, oh, how dare he? But then if I change the story and say, actually, the rich man here is you, or the rich man here is this person that you know, how many people would say, hang on. It's not quite this. You start to then find a way.
It would change immediately, yeah.
And that's where you find a switching of horses midstream. If that's the standard that you apply, why are you changing it? Just because it now applies to somebody with whom you identify, right? And the same thing applies the other way around as well. It might be somebody you profoundly disagree with on many issues. And I think we've talked about, you may disagree with the person's worldview, you may disagree with the way they conduct their lives, right? That's up to you. You may disagree with what they've said and certain ways they behave, but you would then not come to equity and justice and fair play, and just because it's them, suddenly everything changes, right? So if it's somebody that you like, somebody you agree with, and they are treated in a certain way, they are imprisoned unjustly, for example, we're just talking about liberty and all of that, and you see somebody's liberty being tampered with, because that person is somebody that you agree with, you would say, oh yes, that's not right, we shouldn't do it. And then somebody says, oh, hang on, this person actually subscribes to this perspective that you don't agree with. Oh, suddenly, jail them and lock them away and
changes everything. Yes.
Yeah. And so when we ask the question, should standards, the same standards or different standards, be applied to those who are in leadership or who are role models? Perhaps the question is not so much about those who are in leadership or who are role models. Yeah. Perhaps the question is also about us, about those who are doing the applying of standards. I know we do a lot, we talk a lot about, not passing judgment, not being quick to judge. And there's a context around that, right? Okay, because the same Bible that says, judge not so that you not be judged, also says that seeing what time it is, what manner of people you ought to be, you ought to redeem the time, knowing the days are evil. The Bible expects us to exercise our sense of discernment between good and evil, so that we can apply that to making good decisions. So the issue here is not so much about judging somebody, right? Because you hear people saying that, and you say this leader has behaved in a certain way, and some people would say, well, if you've never done anything wrong, how can you shouldn't say that they're doing something wrong, right? So it's not necessarily about judging an individual and saying, oh, we're putting a checklist on you, we're weighing you, you're doing this, right? That's not what it's about. I think what it's about is making sure that ourselves, our moral compass, right? It's not dependent on man, it's not dependent on our sentiments, but really firmly aligned with our worldview, right? That's and when we describe God and we say He's a God without injustice, good and upright is He. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of His throne. What manner of people we ought to be. This scripture I like to quote, and I'm going to end there.
Yeah,
which is
and
where we say,
Prof,
love, like injustice.
Thank you so very much for that. The thing, as you said, all of this even starts from us. And so, viewers, I hope you have got something from today's episode. Emoji started preaching already, and Prof took over, and I'm sure Pastor Temi can't wait to just put the icing on the cake for us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It is time for service, and as always, Prof, please take us into service.
Thank you, Bibby. I think there's nothing more to add. We're advancing and we're moving forward. Everything we've said is still against the backdrop of let's see what the Spirit has to say to the church.
Today.
It advanced Sunday. Let's go for it. Don't go anywhere. See you at the service.
See you. Bye.
Bye.